Good evening, everyone. Welcome in. It is Wednesday, which means it's time for Tavern Talks here on the Master of Dungeons Twitch channel. I'm the Master of Dungeons, and tonight we do have our guest, Mr. Jon Christian, one of my good friends from Baldwin Games, of course, and he is a content creator, which we will talk about a little bit tonight. He's, of course, co-story lead for the Baldwin Games Dragonlance adventures for the Adventurers League, which is the organized play for Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome in, Jon. How's it going?
Lolly ho, my friend. How you doing?
Huzzah! Doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. So a little bit about the segments that we do here on the Tavern Talks. It is basically just a basic interview, just discussing a little bit about some content creators and such that I've met over the past few years and such like that, and just finding out a little bit about how you got into D&D. So let's go ahead and start off with the first question. When did you begin playing Dungeons and Dragons?
30 years ago this year, actually. Yeah,
Nice.
been a while. We're up to officially 3 decades at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. Old school. I guess we could call this the old graybeard
That's
show.
right.
I guess tonight. Right?
It's a weird thing. Like we played D&D, but it wasn't. We didn't know what the rules were when we were kids. And so whenever I say I've been playing for 30 years, It was a friend of mine invited me over to his house. It was just him, for a sleepover or whatever. And his brother had left some of his stuff from whenever he went off to college, and so he had an old trunk full of stuff, books and miniatures and little he'd taken like printer paper effectively and folded it over and printed off and even hand wrote and drew maps and stuff like that on there. It's freaking crazy. And it was like the best thing I can give you is like as a kid is like the Goonies experience of opening up a treasure chest and you have like the golden light rays shoot out from it. So his brother had played, but he never knew how to play the game. Gotcha. And so the way we ended up playing, it was AD&D. The way that we played was he was the DM and I was the player. It was just one-on-one, and he would roll stuff, and he was just arbitrarily deciding whether or not it was successful or not in order to create tension and drama and all that good stuff. I didn't know any better until years later, whenever I had to run my own game. He had no idea what the rules were. He knew that he had a die and that he would roll it, and he would have me roll damage every once in a while, and sometimes it killed something, and sometimes I'd have to roll the dice a couple times for it to kill them. And so 30 years though since I've been doing that.
Yeah, my buddy that taught me, this is going to be at Gen Con, it's going to be my 40th anniversary, but that's exactly how we started off, just the two of us playing, and then so you began as a player. When did you actually start to learn and be interested in actually learning the rules of the game?
From playing this game right here. In the background, I've got it's the Dragonlance, the Champions of Krynn, the old TSR gold box stuff. So I didn't know how to play the game until I started learning how to play the game through the computer game. Okay. It was all Thaco. Right, so, that was the time where I was actually learning the rules, as opposed to just like going over to my buddy's house, listening to the Doors, which that's another thing. That's like the soundtrack of D&D for me is the Doors. But once I started playing the video games, I needed to understand the crunch behind it in order to optimize my characters and stuff like that. So that's whenever I actually bought the books for the first time. The first time I bought the books was to understand the rules better. They come with some little pamphlets or booklets and stuff like that gives you some of the detail, but you really want the sauce, you got to go to the source.
So then the first books you bought was it first edition Advanced D&D?
It was AD&D, and then I realized that the stuff this is essentially kind of like this weird hybrid form of I think they were probably in transition between first and second edition. And so it was like the first version of second edition is essentially what it was. So whenever most of it made sense in the AD&D books that I bought, because that's what I ended up getting. And then I kind of had to like put 2 and 2 together between what was in the AD&D books, the PHB, and the booklets that came with the game in order to game craft or theory craft the system a bit.
Gotcha. So how long after you started, playing, did you DM your first session as a dungeon master?
It was a while. We played D&D first for like 2 years, pretty consistently, And then it was the devil, and I burned my original books. I burned my books. I've burned my Dragonlance novels. I burned my Dragonlance. The one thing that didn't make it, I couldn't find it. It's the only reason why I didn't get burned. It was like in some old stuff. Was my Dragonlance Adventures book. So I still have my original one.
Oh,
from
nice,
there.
nice.
But it was the devil. We went to church camp and got riled up. The story goes, that wasn't the worst of it. Like mine was pretty egregious burning those books, but a friend of mine, Jake, in high school, he burned his dad's Beatles albums.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, living in the 80s, going through the satanic panic or whatever during that time period. My mother did burn multiple copies of the original D&D's and Demigods book with the Cthulhu and the Melpomene mythos in there.
The biggest tragedy out of all of it, I think, in that instance, was I had written, no, granted, I was like 13, 14 years old, so it's not like it was Shakespeare, but I had written a script for like a Dungeons and Dragons movie that was handwritten in cursive, and it was on like college ruled white paper in a little brown binder. I can still see it in my head, probably like 80 to 100 pages long. And I burned that too.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I'm never getting that one back.
I'm pretty sure it probably would have been better than the first D&D movie.
That's arguable. I'm with you on I'm with you on that side of it. So, but anyway, so it took me. You stopped playing D&D, and then we had to kind of like sneak around playing a game. And so the game that we snuck around playing with that we could get away with was Star Wars, the old West End game. Oh, and I was a player in that for years, and then. I still couldn't play D&D before I got out of high school and went to college. And so what I did is I took the West End Games 6D mechanic and I made my own, like a medieval fantasy without magic or gods or anything like that that would get me into trouble. And so whenever I came up with that, I made some additional homebrew mechanics from it outside of the regular 6D stuff, obviously, or D6 stuff. And so I ran that game. That was technically the first game I ever ran. Was not even Dungeons and Dragons. It was the thing that I could play that wouldn't get me in trouble. And then I probably didn't run my first game of D&D at all until like 3rd edition came out because I was in college. What Mama didn't know wouldn't hurt her anymore. And so my buddies and I, we came up in 3rd edition really. I've played every other edition since then. It ran every other edition since then, but yeah, it's been a long winding road to get to where I am now.
Yeah. So, what do you enjoy more, being a player or being a DM?
Man, I love being a DM. I'm a really awkward player. I just don't know what to do with myself. There's just I don't have enough administrative things or kind of like buttons and knobs to pull, and like I sit idle and I don't really know what. So when it's my turn, I'm like, oh, finally I get to do something, and then it just comes out as nervous energy usually at the table. I do love it, especially love playing with other creators and other writers, other designers in particular. I love seeing the way that they run their games. But yeah, definitely 100%. It's going to be the Dungeon Master. I am a proud forever Dungeon Master.
Nice. Well, let's just go back to being a player. What's something you really like about being a player?
I love party support. Always have. Every game that I've played, whether it's at the table or on a video game, I love playing party support of like a World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy. I'm always a cleric or a healer type or something that's going to buff somebody else. And the way that I tried to explain it to somebody once before was like all of the damage and all the bad guys that get knocked down or killed, like you get to have credit for all of them or like partial credit for every single one. So I've got a share in that kill or I've got a share in that victory and every single victory. So as a player, I love giving people a spotlight and giving everybody a platform to kind of like to shine in. And then that's always been like that. I'm party support through and through.
That's really nice. So back to the Dungeon Master side, I know you were talking about the knobs to pull and things to levers to pull, stuff like that. What do you like best about being a Dungeon Master?
Yeah, that's an easy one too. I like making people happy. I love it whenever people have a good time. I love evoking emotions and like really positive experiences, like generating tension that gets released, and like oh, thank God that we like so and so they didn't fail their third death saving throw or something like that. Or I like just like I like entertaining people. That's really the biggest thing. And so for if I don't, there's nothing egotistical behind it at all. Outside, the selfish thing is the more that they have fun, the more I'm selfishly enjoying myself at the table.
Yeah.
So kind of like you can kind of see like the it dovetails, right? Player and the DM. It really just boils down to like, is everybody having a good time, and how can I facilitate that? It's really on either end, whatever seat I'm sitting in at the time. It's pretty much the same philosophy. So yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
I've noticed it's something that as we get older playing, that we become, I think, more conscious of is
Mm.
making sure that, I mean, because we're players too as the DM, but just facilitating, like you said, the fun of everyone at the table, making sure that we're all playing a game together. Where when you're younger, you might just be thinking about your own character, or you know, you might be. I know a lot of DMs go through different phases of, I want to say, career of being a DM, where you become like you go through the antagonistic phase where you
Mm-hmm.
think it's you versus the players, and the players play that way. And then I found that more experienced DMs, as you had mentioned, are more about facilitating everyone having a good
Yeah,
time.
it's all about being seasoned. It's really what it boils
So,
down to, I think.
so
Mellowing.
yeah. With that question in mind, still going back, what's one of your worst memories of playing D&D, aside from
Oh,
burning all of those vintage books?
yeah. Well, that's definitely as a community member, right, or as a gamer in general, is probably the worst thing that ever happened to me. The worst thing as a DM, that's pretty easy too. Really, I hate killing characters. I just hate it. Like I know that I've got to do it, and I've got to create that again boils down to tension, and you got to pay, like even characters pay stupid tax. They play stupid games, win stupid prizes sometimes, and sometimes the bad guys win, and
Mhm,
sometimes it may be a mock victory by killing just one of the characters in the party. But
mhm,
yeah, I think the first character that I killed off, I felt super guilty about, and I was just
mhm,
the player was crushed by it, which did not help at all.
mhm,
It was not malicious. I think I'd already grown out of the. I never really was an antagonistic DM. I don't think
mhm.
anyway. I think
I don't
that
think I was either. Yeah.
what typically will happen is the players will my players in my home game many moons ago, they were antagonistic, and I just fed off of their antagonism, and I was like, oh, well, it's gonna be like that kind of game then, okay, and but it's like playful beer and
Yeah.
pretzels, kind of like
Mhm,
joshing one another. But yeah, that was it. Like killing off a character, and then that player just being crestfallen by it and crushed. This I think the character had gone through. This is again in college, so we'd gone 100 games for all I know. I don't know how much it was, dozens probably, dozens of games, and a year or two at least of play. They'd invested so much, and it wasn't. I hadn't figured out a really good way, I think, at that point as a DM to make deaths meaningful,
mhm,
even the most pointless death, making it feel like it meant something.
mhm.
So it was like red shirt number two came off a red shirt goblin number two came out of the off to the from the side of the stage and stabbed him in the back, and his character just bleeds out on the ground while everybody else is trying to fend for themselves. And so
Yeah.
it was meaningless, and it was something that was really important to him. So I felt like just a freaking butthead for it. It
Well,
was
that does
awful.
bring up that brings up a great point, though. Making those types of situations meaningful. I remember, and I think I've said this before. Like, you obviously know that I am not a person that is believes that TPKs are a badge of honor.
Hmm.
And we were, I was Baldwin Games. We were at Gen Con one year, and I was rooming with one of the TM that was first time there, and he hasn't been back since. But he sat down and he came back in the room and said that he had a fresh table of fresh players, and he had a TPK in his game. And I was like, at tier one, I'm like, okay, I'm going to explain something to you just to give you an idea. Like you mentioned, like a red shirt coming off the side. It's like going, imagine all of the characters from The Walking Dead walking in, and then just random zombie kills them all.
Hmm.
I mean, you gotta find some way to do that. You gotta find some way to make me. That's a really good point there too. So, and on the other side, what's your favorite or best D&D memory that you can think of? I mean, you probably have a ton of them. What's one that
Oh
just stands
man,
out to you?
You know what though? That's another one that kind of is an easy one for me. I've had a lot of really great experiences. I feel pretty blessed as a DM that I would say that 98% of the tables that I've run in organized play for complete strangers have been great tables. Varying degrees of great, right? Some of them are phenomenal, and some of them are just really, really good. And I think I've maybe had one or two players that just didn't mix. The chemistry wasn't there, or we had some toughness that happened there, but they weren't jerks or anything, right? Just just tough, right? But no, that's an easy one. The only campaign that I've finished, the only one in running, let's see, technically I probably run for like 22 years. I think that's about right. 22 years of DMing. I've only completed one full from beginning of the story to the end of the story campaign. One.
Oh, really?
And that was my curse. That was my Curse of Strahd game, and I ran that for my wife, my oldest daughter, and our two of our best friends here in Tennessee. They're the godparents to our kids, and another buddy of mine from high school. So it's like that group. We played off and on for 3 years to finish this thing out. But we were like, my wife got pregnant. Our friend Elizabeth, she got pregnant, so there was always like something. We'd have to have like these 2 or 3, 4 month long hiatuses, but we finally finished it, and holy crap, it was like the best payout whatsoever. Like all of it took so long to kind of like string everything out, and so I'd have to do recaps, and then we'd have to kind of like we'd build up momentum, and we'd be doing really well again, and then something would happen, and we'd have to go on a hiatus again. But yeah, finishing that out was awesome. It was. It was like the sense of accomplishment for me as a DM, and really more than anything else was just the payout was like the people that were playing it loved it, and they just felt like this really sense of closure, which I don't think a lot of tables get that, to be honest. So that's it was good to be a good feeling to finally finish it out.
Plus, it's one of the, in my opinion, one of the best written 5th edition modules that they've got out so far.
Oh yeah, and there are just pounds and pounds of tons of ways that you can make it personal to your characters, right? And so like it's a great story. It's got a phenomenal villain, the setting, the environment, like everything's there for you. And then there's so many great ways that you can thread in your characters' personalities, their backstories, all that good stuff. I even doused some Dragonlance up in there and made it work too, right? So
I mean, Ravenloft was invented by Tracy and his wife, right?
Yeah, exactly. We got Laura and Tracy. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Ravenloft, the Curse of Strahd is easily it's the number one 5e for sure. Adventure.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite worlds to play in. But yeah, I was just last year when we all went to Gen Con, we had the panel with Margaret Tracy. That day is when I realized that he came up with Ravenloft. I did not know that.
You didn't know? Oh, yeah.
I had never even thought to look at the cover of the module back in the day, and I was like, "What?"
Man.
I came home.
I love the story behind that. I love it. It's such a like. It's everybody has that moment at a table, especially during the Gygaxian dungeon era, right? Where like for the story goes, abbreviated version is that Tracy was playing D&D, and one of his buddies is running it. They run across a random vampire in a dungeon, and they fight the vampire and they kill him. And then he's like, after the fact, he's like, "What was he doing there? Why was he there? Like,
what's the backstory?
What's so random? What was his name?" And so from that was like the genesis for him of like, I want my own vampire in a dungeon, but I want it to mean something, and for there to be a story that's wrapped around it. And that was a completely alien idea, as strange as it seems to us now.
Oh yeah,
like we're just steeped in lore and story and narrative now. That was just not a thing back then. And so he's like the godfather of the D&D narrative.
It was all, like you said, the Gygaxian dungeon crawl, classic, Tomb of Horrors types of stuff. And that's actually an interesting thing too, because obviously there's a lot of story drawn, especially the Curse of Strahd, the newer books. A lot of the story drawn from the Bram Stoker's Dracula and stuff like that. And actually, that's how I went through and did a lot of in my own campaign world. I did a lot of pulling from real world mythologies, real
Mhm.
world stories to create different areas of the land there. Which, yeah, I didn't. Like I said, I just found out last year we were at Gen Con about that. So, when you're DMing, say you're getting ready for a convention or a home, even a home game or anything like that, what do you find is the hardest thing to prep as a dungeon master?
Reading. I'm terrible at reading. It's
Hmm.
awful. I love to write and I love to read, but whenever I'm reading an adventure, a lot of the adventures that are written now, this is not like a dig against anybody at all,
Oh yeah.
but they're so disparately organized sometimes. Like I just like it's what I typically do. It's like I'm studying it's like I'm in college again and I'm having
Hmm.
to study for a test. I print everything out and then as I'm reading it, I can't just do one read through or two read throughs and I'm good to go.
Hmm.
I'm an over preparer, which is my own fault. That's not anybody's fault but my own. My OCD kicking in. But whenever I'm prepping for a game, I need to know what the most important beats are in it. But they're everywhere. They're mixed throughout the whole thing, and there's not just like one big like a bulleted list of here are the beats. Here's the order that things are going to kind of go in. Here's where you can kind of deviate if you need to, but make sure that you get them back to here. Make sure that the
Hmm.
rails come back up here. You know, you can
Hmm.
derail anywhere between X and Z, but or between X and Z, but you know, Y's
Make
where
sure they
the
hit Y. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But then make sure that you get them to Z, right? So that's probably it. Honestly, it's the reading through the adventures is the toughest part. I love all of the arts and crafts of. I love handouts and I love prepping, like picking out my minis. And if I do terrain, which depends on the convention, you know, sometimes I'll go whole hog and I'll bring a bunch of stuff that I then regret bringing so much crap with me because I'm lugging it around everywhere. But the players love it, and so it's a labor of love. But yeah, just like the prep is the worst part is just the reading through it and trying to figure out like this author has something, a writer has something really really great that they were passionate about, that they thought them to themselves, this is going to make a great adventure. And then, but it's like a mining expedition to find exactly what it is that they love so much about it. And
Hmm.
so it would be good if I weren't under the gun for prep. You know, it's like I
Yeah.
have to prep this thing. It's like
Yeah.
business, quote unquote, related. It's not
Yeah.
me reading a fiction novel or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I took a little bit of Troy's advice and stopped taking minis to conventions and just bring starbursts.
He's the smartest
Uh,
one, man.
because I ended up, I had like probably $500 worth of miniatures in a tub, and I left them at Gen Con. But luckily,
No.
the wonderful Ted Atkinson was there, and he we got a hold of I got a hold of I think it was Brian or Troy, and they looked and Ted found him for me. I was like, oh my goodness! And they brought him to the house on their way home.
No kidding, man.
But yeah,
Holy
so now
crap.
it's like, yep, Starburst for everyone. Or I'll have different types of candies that I'll have out there.
Mm.
Some some sugar free stuff too. You did mention earlier that you've ran pretty much every edition. What is your favorite edition of Dungeons and Dragons?
That's really tough. I came up from third, but it's not my favorite. I love
Mhm.
third. I love third and
Mhm.
I love 3-5. I even like there's like I think it's one of those weird things where as we get further away from fourth edition, I think we're gonna hate it. We hate it less. I know I do.
I
Fourth
like the
edition is not.
prequels to Star Wars.
Yeah. Oh wow, it is. That is so timely. Yes. A matter of fact, I was just thinking that the other day. But yeah, like the further away that I get away from fourth, I realize how there's some really smart things that they did in fourth that then became like softly adopted in fifth, or like kind of like that we took off the harsh edges on it in order to make it work better to make it feel like D&D. It didn't
Mhm.
feel like D&D. That was its Achilles heel. Probably not second. Man, it's going to be a toss up between AD&D and fifth, but I'm gonna maybe a hot take. I'm an old school gamer. I respect my OG D&D, but I'll go fifth just because it's been the most easily accessible game to
Mhm.
players, and I'm a huge advocate for bringing new players to the table, new DMs to run the game. It's got its warts. You know, it's not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination, but it is pretty freaking good.
Mhm.
And I've probably enjoyed my time running games for 5e over any other version that I've
Yeah,
played in.
it does feel like it's at least to me that it's gone more back to the storytelling element of the game. I mean, of course, there are still players that are looking to optimize as much as they can, especially when we're playing in, with the Adventures League like we do for a lot of our games, because, the characters are portable and, you're always going to have, as we called them back in the day, min-maxers. Or optimizers now, but I do think that it's brought back, like you mentioned, a bit easier to tell the story without so many rules. Now, like, I love 3.5, but in order to make a 3.5 character, you got to sit down and spend half of a day.
Yeah, I remember my sister trying to run it for her and her husband for the first time. It was the two of them and my wife, and we spent 2.5 hours on character creation in third edition. And by the end of the two and almost 3 hours, there was nothing left to do, really. They had to go home at that point. It punctuated one of the real problems that you had with third and crunchier games and crunchier settings, or not settings, but systems like that. There's so much math and there are so many moving parts in it. It makes it less accessible. And fifth edition still very crunchy, and it's still really, really tactical. But I think that they made the crunchier bits of it more. I don't know. It's like narrative driven is not the right word, but they made it more generalized, and like you kind of make up your own decision on what this role is or what that is. And I don't know that that's necessarily in the books that it's like that. I think it's definitely part of what we've generated as a fifth edition culture and as gamers is like rule of cool is kind of the thing we want to kind of like lean into. And you got all those neat skills that are there, and you got the saving throws, and you kind of lean on those instead of everything having to be swinging a sword or hurling a spell.
Yeah. So, as a player or a TM, what is your favorite class in D&D? Any edition?
Oh man, that's easy. The cleric, baby. The cleric, but like a very, very close second is going to be your paladin. I love playing holy characters, or like I play like characters that are driven by divine purpose. I like playing heroic characters and supportive characters. And I like those old school, iconic. I can't help it, man. I love Superman. I love Captain America. I like the good guys, and Batman he's fine, I guess. Like they make a good movie every once in a while. That's all fine and good. But like I need the big blue Boy Scout in tights and a cape. That's my jam. So definitely a cleric, easy peasy.
I'm going to assume the answer to this, but what's your favorite D&D race?
Oh.
You are called the Dwarven DM online, so
I think it would betray my own heritage if I didn't say dwarves. But I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you this one. I will tell you what my favorite sub-race of dwarves are.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be probably the hill dwarves.
Okay.
Mountain dwarves are great, but like because I'm just such a giant Dragonlance nerd, really more than anything else. Mountain dwarves tend to be more I don't know, cloistered and closed off from the rest of the world. Those vaunted halls of stone, they use them as like a social barrier between themselves and the other species, races, nations, whatnot. Where the hill dwarves are the ones that are like they either got kicked out or they got locked out or whatever, or they decided they didn't want to live under a hill forever. So they're probably the more social dwarves between them, and then much love for the gully dwarves, by the way.
I was going to say something.
Much love to the gully dwarves. I think they got like a really, really nasty rep here in fifth edition. I know they got stripped out of the recent Dragonlance book, which I think is a bummer, because I always thought I never really saw them only as comedic fodder. I saw them as my families. They're all mountain people. They all came from West Virginia, coal miners. So I always thought of them as like coal miner types, where they're like just salt of the earth. They don't need book learning. They got common sense and street smarts, and that's really the thing that's important to them. But
I'm wondering if looking at obviously inclusion and things like that are becoming more important. I'm kind of wondering if they weren't left out, because I mean, if you look back at some of the writing, the 80s and 90s and stuff like that, it is a little cringy compared to what people were expecting today.
Yeah, I'm not mad that they took them out. I think that
it could have been used though to have like a really emotional story or something.
I think part of it is that's it, right? Like I think how much do you like the do you like Gully Dwarves? Because if you don't have somebody that likes Gully Dwarves behind sitting in the writer's chair, it's easy for you to say, you know what, I'm really not interested in focusing on this right now. It's one of the main reasons why Superman movies are typically, or Superman stories are typically okay at best, is because a lot of the people that want to write for them is like, well, he's big and strong and super fast, and he's got all this other stuff, so he's an action character, and that's what we're gonna focus on, instead of like the morality play of being a god among cardboard cutout people and not trying to murder them, even by accident, right? I think that's for Gully Dwarves in particular. I understand why they did it, so I'm not mad that they did it. It's a bummer they did it. I think that, to your point, I think that you could have made something really compelling. You could have turned the expectation of how you used Gully Dwarves on its head and made them really, really interesting characters. But I think, it's easy for them to be seen as a race of dumb, dirty people, and that's horrifying for a lot. Yeah, because that's what a lot of people comes to mind. And trying to open a dialogue with a new player that doesn't know any different and saying like, oh, whoa, but here's why they're really not that thing. It's just, it takes so much more effort to do that than just say, you know what, they're past their prime, and you put them out to pasture, and then you let the folks on the DM's Guild use them if they want to use them.
So speaking of that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Dragonlance. I believe was it last week or the week before last, the first of the Vault of the Undying was released on the DM's Guild.
It did, yeah. Dragons of Divinity, which is a 2-hour prelude adventure that I wrote back in. It was premiered in December. Right. So a lot of this has been a lot of back end, getting the right people together for editing and layout design and artwork, all that good stuff. So it's taken that long just to kind of get the pipeline up and running. And so now we're starting to churn out actual product. And so, that was released on DM's Guild, and people seem like they really, really love it. And I couldn't be happier. Because that's all I really want. It's not for me. Like, I don't know very many people that get into writing or game design for money, because there's not much in it. And so you can barely make a living on it, really. And that's like pumping out hundreds of thousands of words a month to do it. Yeah. So really, what it boils down to is, I just wanted to introduce Dragonlance to a new generation of players and readers, really. And then, for the torchbearers out there, the people that have been loving on Dragonlance for years and years, through the dark years of 4th edition where there was no Dragonlance love, kind of giving them something back and saying, here it is. This is our chance. We got a hardcover, but that's pretty much it. At this point, everything's DM's Guild now. And so this is the closest thing to official content we're going to get for the foreseeable future.
So tell us a little bit about the prelude. Tell us, and maybe, obviously, you don't want to give away any spoilers about things that are upcoming, any adventures, because I believe you're writing all the way up to. Are you going into tier 3?
We're gonna be the tip of the spear on tier 3, probably 1 or 2 adventures, and that's gonna be about it.
Oh, okay. So
we're gonna have a really broad middle of tier 2, though.
Oh, nice. So go ahead and maybe give us a little bit idea of this kind of story that's going on. Most of the stuff that the DDAL adventures did, they usually either complemented the hardcover that they were, put out with, or something along those lines. Is your storyline that you and Alan came up with, is that going to be paralleling the hardcover itself, or just give us maybe a brief synopsis of what's going on?
The basic story comes from something that I wrote almost 10 years ago. It was like borderline fan fiction / anytime that I write something, if I'm prepping an adventure of my own that's homebrew, I usually have like mountains of bullet points of the story, just beats that I need to remember in every single session, and then I catalog those and I keep everything. I'm such an electronic hoarder. I've kept everything. So
crazy, right?
Right. And so
terabytes of extra.
I'm telling you, it's like I need shares in Dropbox and Carbonite to save all of my electronic storage stuff. So no, it came from the story that I wrote, Vault of the Undying. And so no one really knows what the Vault of the Undying is yet. We'll get there. But for the time being, it comes out of from the time period is going to be the War of the Lance. One of the things that whenever I was first sitting down and determining like where and the when, right? Where is it going to be played? It's going to be it's Dragonlance. It's going to be on Krynn somewhere. Where's it going to be? Well, it's got to be Ansalon because that's where everybody knows. That's where the majority of the stuff happens that we read about. And so I kind of looked at it like from all like oh God help me, I hope it's a better version of The Force Awakens, right? So whenever they wrote The Force Awakens, for better or worse, whatever your opinions are, they may vary, but when they wrote it, it's very obvious that what they were trying to serve two sets of people. People that had no idea what Star Wars was, and people that loved Star Wars. So you got tons and tons of fan service in Force Awakens, and then you got tons and tons. But you also got pretty much the same story of the first three movies, just collapsed. Bigger. Collapsed into a single narrative form in one film to bring everybody to the table, and then you can kind of like traject into more stories from there. Now they stumbled hard after that, in my opinion, which I'll save that. So with that, whenever sort of together, the vision was you have tiers of Dragonlance fan, right? You got tier 1 is, I don't know what a Dragonlance is, but whatever, I'll try it out. It's the only thing that's running right now, so I'll play some Dragonlance. The tier 2 is like I know Dragonlance and I liked it whenever I was a kid, or I think I read the books or something like that. That's cool, yeah, a little bit more excitement, but they're not really super invested in it. The 3s are the ones that are really invested, that are kind of like, again, they've held the torch for a while. They've probably read the books multiple times. They ran games, played games, but they maybe haven't played in a while, or they maybe have a home game. But then your tier 4s are your foaming at the mouth Dragonlance nerds that have shrines in their houses dedicated to Keesis and Paladin. Anyway, and when it came down to writing a story for it and trying to figure out where it was going to be and placed, it boiled down to who am I going to serve first, right? First and foremost. And I made the conscious decision it's going to be the 1s and the 2s, because I want, if you're already invested and if you're already a foaming at the mouth Dragonlance nerd, Tracy and Margaret have already got you. Yeah. And you already love it. Yeah. Exactly. You've already got the books and you've got 3rd edition stuff, AD&D. So you've got like scads and scads of material that you can go through. But I want more 1s and 2s. I want the people that have no idea what it is to come up and say, that was awesome. Where can I learn more? And then I can say, funny you should ask. There are these 3 books that you should read next, right? That's the greatest compliment that I can get. And so that's where the genesis of the project really, how it took form. I won't give too much away about like the overall story, right? But what I can say is it's set in Solamnia, which is really kind of like the center of the Dragonlance narrative when it comes to the War of the Lance, right? You've got some stuff that happens down in south in Abyssinia and all this other kind of stuff, but that's where everything starts, where it really kind of hits its apex and climactic end is in Solamnia. And Solamnia is the home of, holy crap, the Knights of Solamnia. You got the dwarves of the Kaelin Mountains. You've got like Naraka and all the evil armies and all this other stuff. They're just like right at the doorstep to the east. So there's just so much that's right there.
Nightland to the south. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So it's right. And it's kind of like in the center of everything. Right. And so, so that gave me location. When during the War of the Lance, we're like it's tough, right? But I've got some of the guys from Dragonlance Nexus are helping me out. They're acting as kind of like a brain trust where I can ask them, hey, what's going on at this point in the story, or what's going on in this area over here, or I've got on the map, I found this one little city. I can't find anything out about it, but I think I want to use it. Can you help me find, like, it was kind of a research team, right? And they've been phenomenal. But they're really just kind of like keeping me from stepping on the toes of canon, which is really, really tough sometimes. And I've thought I knew Dragonlance until I started writing for Dragonlance, like officially writing for it. And I've had to learn a lot more. But so during the War of the Lance, it's in Solamnia. When specifically during the War of the Lance, the Dragons of Divinity starts out in the spring of 351 AC, which is after the cataclysm, right? And that is about, so if you read the books, Dragons of Autumn Twilight is where everybody needs to start out. And that is in 351, but it's in autumn of 351. So this is about 6 months before, which is in line with the Shadow of the Dragon Queen hardcover. It's during the same time frame. But that was more in line with it made sense, right? The product that Wizards of the Coast released was during that time. For AL, we would like to have something that's in parallel, so you'll have call outs to things that are happening during that hardcover campaign. You'll have some call outs that are happening there, but this is its own thing. It's geographically, all the stuff that happens in Shadow of the Dragon Queen is in the north of Solamnia. Our stuff, majority of it happens in the south of Solamnia. So again, those two things are kind of running in parallel. There may be some intersections that happen here and there, but not much, honestly. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in the south that is that's really kind of insular to what's going on.
Yeah, no, I always like to remind viewers and such like that even though a lot of the content that we put out is for the Adventurers League, which is organized play for D&D, you don't have to play Adventurers League to play these adventures. You can take these adventures and homebrew them up and just basically continue having a parallel or different story than the hardcover, which I'm actually running the hardcover. I've ran 8 sessions, I think, for my clients, but
Nice.
It's really, really great. They're really, really enjoying it. We're getting to the point where we're about to go into the Badlands up there, so we're going to see what happens there. But
Poor Vogler. Poor Vogler.
Yeah, poor Vogler. So with Dragonlance, when were you first introduced to it?
Oh boy, 8th grade.
I remember walking into a toy store and seeing the book on the shelf, and I was like, "Wow, D&D novel type." Because I didn't really, didn't have any D&D really branding, just had the Dragonlance there, and so I picked it up and I freaking got home, and I think I read the whole first book that first evening.
Yeah.
So like when, go ahead.
Officially got it. I actually was introduced to it through Champions of Krynn. Because it was a D&D game. I want to play a D&D video game, so I started playing it, and I didn't know that there were books tied to it at all until I started. I think I went to it into a game store and I saw Dragonlance on the top of something. I'm like, I know that thing. And the thing that I saw was the Dragonlance Adventures game accessory, or the source book for AD&D. And so I flipped through the back, and and you could read the novels, Dragonlance, Autumn of Twilight, and da-da-da. And so all 3 of them had come out by the time that I'd been introduced to them. So that's kind of how I got introduced, but I didn't read the Dragonlance Adventures book, or the source book, until after I started reading or after I finished the first trilogy of the Dragonlance books. And the way that went was I bought the first book the same day that I got the Dragonlance Adventures book. And it was like all of my lawn mowing money. I spent like every penny of it on those books, and some dice probably, because I mean, who can help themselves? And I got home and I had church camp the next day. And so I thought, well, I'll just read this on the bus on the way there, and I'll read it whenever, and I'll read it on the way back. I didn't think for one second, because I wasn't a huge reader. I read every once in a while, but wasn't a big book nerd. And then, I read. We had like a 5-hour trip. I read every word of that book in 5 hours. Just. People would want to talk to me, or they'd want to play cards, or they'd screw around, or whatever. Or girls were like trying to like get my attention. And I was like stressed. I was stiff arming them, like, get back away from me. Like, I was so invested in this book. Read a little bit of it the night before, to be honest.
You're not Tika. Get away.
No, you're not Tika, and you're not Lorana. And if you're Kitiara, you never had a chance anyway. But I read through a little bit of it that night that I got it, and then just devoured it on the way there. And I begged our youth minister was actually super, super great. This was not the same one that I had where I ended up burning books with him. And I was like, can I please go to this bookstore while we're at this camp for like a week? Can I go to the bookstore and I can get the second book? Please, I'm begging you, please. He's like, all right. So we did a special trip out to the mall, and I picked up a book from Walden bookstores the Walden books, and then I got the second book. I read that throughout the rest of the week when I could, and I bought the third one and I read it on the way home. So I went through the whole trilogy in that 1 week. I probably didn't get as much Jesus as I needed that week, but I got Tanis, Raceland, Flint, Tass, Sturm, all that good stuff. So yeah, that's how I got introduced, and I was a fan. Immediate fan. Yeah.
So back to a little bit about D&D and DMing and such like that. Obviously, you've been DMing for a couple of decades, almost 3. You were mentioning earlier. What is a piece of, because for those that may not know, John and I work together with Baldwin Games on the mentoring and training committee to help new DMs out and even veteran DMs. What is some sort of advice? Because we always talk about we're always learning. We always talk about toolbox, always learning. What's a piece of advice you'd give to a veteran dungeon master?
Veteran dungeon master. What I've noticed about DMs and players alike that are veterans is I hate to say this, they look at their character sheet too much. And the DMs, I think the DMs, we can fall into the pit of that too. There's a rule for that somewhere, or I can only do what's on my sheet. It's typically the thing that I've noticed with a lot of old school or veteran seasoned players is like, if it's not on there, then I'm not really thinking about it. But there's a lot to learn from the new players that are coming out of there. One of the things I love about them is they haven't fully crystallized in their mind yet what playing D&D is. So they ask questions that I get to say yes to, or I get to say yes and yes but, or how about this, or whatever. And then it becomes like a negotiation of the narrative between the two of us instead of I roll my dice, I swing my sword, I cast my spell. So I think that for the DM in particular, I think that the rules are great, but they are a facilitator more than anything else. And that a really, really good game is just going to boil down to flexibility and a willingness, like your ability to kind of like read the room and read your players and figure out the things that they're really gravitating towards in the story. If they like crunch, if they like investigation, exploration, if they like debate or diplomacy, RP, whatever it is, and kind of like reading the room and figuring out what that is. And that's something that you're not going to find in a book. And so I think a lot of that is, again, as great as the rules are, sometimes you just have to like swing, or like shoot from the hip on some of these the rules and things like, or some of the calls that you make or the mechanical decisions that you have. And when that happens, if, depending on your players or anything like that, there may be questions about it either before, after, or during. Whenever you make a call like that, that's shooting from the hip, and that's not like 100% rule or from the book, right? Rules as written, and just having a really good understanding between you and your players that's going to happen from time to time, and it's for the sake of the narrative. It's never anything that would to impede or impinge upon like player functionality or character functionality, or like it's not for you to like. To your point, the point further, like having an antagonistic relationship between you and the player, or you and the character, right? You're not actively trying to kill them. The bad guys are, but you're really not, right? And so I think that kind of that relationship of flexibility kind of needs to be on both sides of the table.
So, what about some advice for a brand new dungeon master?
Brand new dungeon master. Run Lost Mine of Phandelver because it's fantastic, and it is the baby step. It is hands down the best adventure to run as a new DM, and I hope they find a better one. I hope they make a better one. I'm mad that it wasn't me that I didn't write it, but it's so freaking good. It's five levels. It's not so much for you to take in that you're overwhelmed by how much you have to run. If you run the first chapter and you hate the game, that's fine. And you don't have like a ton that's invested into it. It's not a huge financial investment. You got all of the rules that matter are in there. You got pre-generated characters. You got dice. Everything you need is in that box. The best advice I can give you is do not go out on YouTube, or don't worry about going on YouTube, or don't fixate on it at least. And getting overwhelmed by advice and how do I run the perfect game? Just run a game. And if you run a game, run Lost Mine of Found Delver.
There are more.
Or you can run Dragons of Divinity. That's fine too, because that's definitely an option.
So, what we talk about D&D, we always also like to talk about what do you enjoy outside of Dungeons and Dragons.
Man, do I like anything other than Dungeons and Dragons? Let me think about that for a second. Hang on, let me. I like gaming. Like that's the honest truth. I'll just say outside of gaming. Like I love D&D, but I play a ton of other systems. Whether it's Forbidden Lands, Tales from the Loop, Mothership. Let's see, Symbaroum. We played like a 10-episode arc of The One Ring by Free League, which is fantastic.
I know. I'm so disappointed I could not stay for that.
Man,
that session. That sounds so
really
great.
Good. Yeah, our buddy Ulysses really knocked it out of the park from a lore perspective, and he's just super, super steeped in the flavor and the themes and all that good stuff. So it was just
he played a couple sessions on our live play. Played a character named Aurora. Came in and
he's
played
great.
with us. Yeah,
Ulysses is a fantastic player to have at your table. I could not recommend him. Like if you could like grab him by the collar and yank him to your table, and that wasn't assault, don't do that. But if you could somehow lure him over with candy or wine or something like that, then that'd probably be a better idea. But he's great. But yeah, I think that I play a lot of other games, and as a designer and a writer, man, that really just it's amazing how much more I can come up with that is different and unique. That is still feels like D&D. Whenever I'm writing a story, or mechanically in particular, right? Like if I want to make a mechanical method for travel, where's that? Like, does D&D do that very well? Nope. Doesn't. There's nothing in there really about travel. No rules on. Well, the One Ring sure does, and it's great. It's really, really good because that's very Lord of the Rings centric. It's all about travel and the journey, and it's not the destination. It's the journey kind of stuff.
Yeah, we had the most recent Obscure Devotions adventure took place basically over like 166 days of travel.
Oh yeah.
So that's why I suggested the author said, "Hey, check out the rules from One Ring, and maybe implement some of that." And it turns out they did a great job with that. Yeah. So as we're wrapping up here, why don't we tell everyone where they can find you on social media? I know that you do podcasts. Maybe talk about that a little bit for a couple minutes.
Yeah, you bet. Wow. So I'm all over the place these days. If you want to catch me specifically, you want to keep up with Dragonlance stuff, if you want to keep up with various musings and whatnot that I've got, for better or worse, I've dipped my toe into Twitter pretty deeply. The good thing is I've actually met some really, really cool people through Twitter, shockingly. That are like-minded Dragonlance nerds like myself. Shout out to Yodano and Redworm and the rest of the guys out there. But if you want to catch me on there, it's Dwarven DM. At Dwarven DM is where you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. I really don't do Facebook as often as I do Twitter these days. But most of my time that's not devoted to Dragonlance stuff, Twitter stuff, is going to be on Geekscant, which is, for any of you that are in the know, you know exactly what Geekscant is. And it doesn't mean it is not cannot. It is the secret language of geeks, which is a podcast and a live stream that we do every single Sunday and Tuesday here on Twitch at 9 p.m. Central.
So they are after us, so you can leave right from us and go check them out.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. And then let's see, Troy Sandlin and Zach Goins are my fellow co-hosts. Troy and Zach both work for World of Game Design. Zach is actually their creative director there, and he's great to work with. A lot of really phenomenal insights. We talk about everything. We talk mostly about running games and kind of like game theory and stuff like that. But we've talked about comic books and movies, and we've done reviews, and we'll do like review challenges where each one of us will watch it. We'll say, we're gonna go. You need to go watch this movie, and you need to watch this movie. Well, all three of us will watch the three movies. We'll come back together and punish one another for making those recommendations most of the time. But yeah, so those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. If you want to keep up on the Dragonlance stuff outside of my stuff, obviously, like Mitch, stay up to speed with Baldman Games. If you want to see when the new releases are coming out, We've got Dragons of Divinity just came out, and we're going to have Dragons of Destruction, the epic, the first in history Dragonlance epic, is going to be publishing pretty soon. I'm in the final stages of review.
Too.
Oh,
A lot
it's
of fun.
a blast.
I ran that at the premiere. It's a lot of fun. All right. Well, John, thanks for coming on and talking D&D, talking Dragonlance. I'm probably going to reach out to Troy and Zach sometime here in the next month or so. Just to let everyone know, we to Belinda Baldwin in again next week. I did have a little bit of issues with the sound and such, so instead of doing something different, we're just going to go ahead and give Belinda some more time next week on Tavern Talks. She'll be back, and we'll talk about D&D with her as well. Don't forget tomorrow from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern, we'll have streaming here Dungeon Delvings, which we play Lord of the Rings online. We do play on the Landerval server. That'll be on Thursday and Friday. And of course, we'll be back on Sunday evening with our live playthrough of The Keys from the Golden Vault, Part 2 of Prisoner 13, which takes the characters into Revel's Inn, which you can see, and of course, in the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves film. If you haven't, please check us out down below in the About section. You can click on our Discord panel and join our Master of Dungeons community Discord. There's also a link down there for our link tree that has all of our social media platforms on there. Go through, give them a like. Definitely check out Dwarven DM at Twitter, at Dwarven DM on Twitter. We'll put all of that information in once we get the YouTube loaded up to the YouTube here in a week or so. We'll put all of those links down in the description as well. Again, thank you, Mr. Jon Christian. Hopefully, I will be able to see you here in the month of June, towards the end there at Origins, maybe.
You will.
Yeah. So take care. Thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yes, no problem. And everyone else, take care, and we'll see you next time. Happy adventuring.